Live on WFLA Now. This is Run for Fun with running enthusiast Leigh Spann.
All right, welcome back to the Stream Center for this week's episode of Run for Fun. It's a show we designed to break the myth that running is punishment or worse, an exercise that feels like a chore that you have to do. But it's also, we try to remind these regular runners that it is a hobby that we do for fun, and training can often feel like it's taking over your life. It is important, but there are ways to balance all of that so that you have a nice, healthy lifestyle overall. I'm your host, Leigh Spann. I'm a meteorologist at WFLA in Tampa, but also an avid runner. And I've done, of course, all the wrong things in the last 14, 15 years that I've been consistently running. So I love knowing that this show is helping at least somebody out there not fall victim to the same pitfalls that I fell into and that I'm still learning. And that's why we bring in our Coach Maria, because Coach Maria is the one who is now guiding me in the right direction.
Hello, Leigh. Tell us all about Falmouth. You are like, you've done this race so many times and I've never done it yet. And that's like kind of unheard of, actually.
Yeah, because it's up in your neck of the woods where you grew up.
Yeah.
So every year we go to Falmouth, right on Cape Cod, and it's a beautiful 7-mile course. You don't get many 7-mile courses out there, so it's a fun distance because it's not too long. It's not too you don't have to train quite as hard for it, but the course itself is very interesting because you're running from Woods Hole, which is another little city on the coast of Cape Cod, to Falmouth. And Woods Hole is shaded, but really hilly. And then as soon as you get out on the flats, then you're in the full sunshine. So you're right out on the water. And then it's straight and flat for 3 miles. It's about 3 miles of hills. It's about 3 miles of flat. And then there's two hills, but there's one in particular that's in the last half mile, really the last quarter mile, that really feels like you were going 90 degrees. Like how 90 degrees up and then 90 degrees down. And so I'm always petrified that I'm going to fall in that, because you have to really turn your feet over really quickly not to fall in that. So it's a great race. Up there, people love their runners. And so the amount of spectators makes you feel like an elite runner because there's just thousands of people out every time.
Yeah. I usually do Beach to Beacon, which is like 2 weeks before that, because Falmouth always falls on the week the kids go back to school.
Yep.
So I've never been able to do it, but now that my kids are done, I have no excuse now, but I really would like to go with you. Maybe we can do that next year, Leigh.
Next year. And
it's hard to get into.
It is. And I think it because I'm coming from out of state. I'm assuming that's not a full lottery, but I get a little weighted because I'm coming from out of state and I'm bringing my money to the economy of Falmouth, which I do. And love that area so much, and it is for them the same thing. So they're the kids are go back to school a little bit later there. So for them it is their last hurrah of summer, and there are a lot of parties to prove it.
I bet.
So today we wanted to have Coach Maria. I feel like a lot of runners, even if you're running in small groups, you say, hey, this thing is hurting, or what do I need to eat now? And you're just in your small group or you're just alone running, and sometimes your questions don't really get answered. So that's really kind of why we wanted to have just sort of an open-ended ask Maria a question.
And sometimes your questions get answered incorrectly too.
Well, there is also that.
I noticed, I sit in a run group and I just listen because I try not to say my opinion unless I'm asked. And sometimes I have to bite my tongue and be like, that's not the right answer. Don't give that person that answer. But it's okay.
So a lot of
we all learn our own way.
We all learn. And so while we are trying to create this sort of digital community, we have our Strava group, and that's actually where a lot of our questions are going to come from. But I just wanted to show you, we haven't checked in on this in a while. We're now at 305 members.
Yay.
But this was where I first posted about 2 weeks ago, like, hey, coming up, we're going to do this question and answer with Coach Maria. What questions do you have? And I was, pleasantly surprised with the number that came in, because I do think, especially for people who are just putting their shoes on and running their miles every day or every other day or whatever it is, you have a lot of questions and you don't really know where to go.
Well, and it's funny because I put it on my personal Facebook page and I got a lot of PMs that were like, I don't feel comfortable asking this on a regular page, but the funny part is a lot of these questions all runners have.
Yeah.
It's not, you're not alone in these questions. I can tell you that the same 10 to 15 questions get asked almost all the time, which is why when I'm coaching, a lot of times I do broad answers because we've had the question asked multiple times by multiple people. You're not alone, I promise.
Yeah. The first one that actually came through from the Strava group is the first one I'm going to talk about because it's one that I think I have never heard asked specifically in this way. And it was why the question came in while I had just been running with elite runners in the Falmouth Road Race. Emma Bates was there. So how limited are we by genetics? Can anyone run a 15-minute 5K with enough training, or was it already determined that you're not going to be that fast the day you were born? So Nathaniel put this in on Strava. And I have wondered this. I mean, if I, who runs a 23, 22 on our best day, 5K, is there enough training to get me to 15 minutes?
Yeah. So it's funny that this question gets asked a lot, but I also think a lot of people just assume that genetics don't play a role in running for some reason. And I'm not quite sure why you would even consider that genetics doesn't play a role. Genetics actually plays a very big role in how fast you can be as a runner. VO2 max is actually pretty much determined at birth. You can't really change VO2 max that much. It's pretty negligible, the amount that you can change it. But that being said, I would say it's from research says anywhere, and I know this is broad, but that's because the research is pretty broad on this, but it's 20 to 80% genetics. So there is a limiting factor on how fast you can run. And no, not everybody can run a 15-minute 5K. That is the short end of I know it stinks, but there are not good musicians and there are not good painters and there are not good. So the good part about running is it doesn't mean you can't do it because you can always improve. And the one thing that I will say is that lactate threshold, you can continually improve your whole life. Aerobic capacity, you can continue to improve your whole life. So I would say that the majority of recreational runners are not going to reach their plateau because it takes so many years to develop it. But I would say if you started training as a kid and you've been training correctly your whole life, you will hit a point where you just can't go any faster. And that will be your limiting factor until you start to decline. Yeah.
So, and over the years, I've heard rumblings or whatever between the fast twitch and the slow twitch muscles or what fibers in your muscles.
You can change those.
Okay.
You absolutely can change those with training. And there is so much that you can do with training, but, and it's interesting because most people quit before they hit their ceiling. That's the short end of this.
It's hard. It's hard to get to your peak.
It's hard to stay patient. It's hard to, like the Shalane Flanagans in the world, they started when they were young and they were, in their 30s when they reached their peak, 30s, late 30s. So you're talking like 25 to 30 years of consistent training over and over again. Most people fail before we can hit that point. So it should never deter you from training. But it definitely, there are limiting factors. And I hate to tell you, but not everybody can qualify for Boston either. Like it's not just do I think most people can? I do, but I think a lot of people don't have the mindset of, oh, it might take me 10 years to do this. It might take me 15 years to do this. They want it within 2 or 3 years. And that's just genetically, some people can do it in 1 to 3 years.
Yeah, when this
not everybody can.
When this question came, I was actually sitting next to my husband and we were again on vacation, and he was like, "Yeah, like, do you think?" So he turned the question around on me. He's like, "Do you think?" Because I think we both know I'm not running a 15-minute 5K, but he goes, "Do you think, like, let's say you quit your job, let's say you did nothing but train, could you qualify for Boston?" And I said, "I believe I could. I mean,
yes,
but I would have to." Do the strength training, and I have to focus on, do all the things that right now I don't focus on. But if this is going to be a goal, yes, I could quit my job.
Absolutely.
I could focus on everything and I could qualify for Boston. I would probably never be able to get to a 15-minute 5K.
Yeah. I mean, 15-minute 5K is, genetics are funny. It's, you're born with a certain amount of muscle. You're born with a certain aerobic capacity. You're born with a certain VO2 max. You're born metabolically different. Like some people metabolically can take in more calories than other people can, and that will make you a better runner. Some people have higher testosterone. Some people have lower testosterone. Genetically, there's a lot that goes into running. And I think we'd be silly if we didn't acknowledge that.
Yeah.
Because we acknowledge it every other place
Right.
where, people genetically probably can't do meteorology the way you do, like
It certainly can't paint
I can't look at all those screens like you're doing. It's just not my capability. So, we all have strengths and weaknesses, but the cool part about it is that we can always improve from where we are.
Yeah.
And we don't have to hit a 15-minute 5K to enjoy our sport.
Right.
That's the cool part.
All right. So thank you, Nathaniel. He actually had a second question
great
coming
question.
in from Strava. And we've touched on this on another podcast, but people can listen to that one in full. But what do you do when you're no longer making progress? We have a whole one on hitting a plateau. And actually, I think another one of your, people have already said, what about this plateau? And he's like, well, just so you know, everyone, this is my favorite thing about what you said in that last one, is that everyone hits it. Everyone hits a plateau at some point. And so don't feel like that's like you're alone.
Yeah, you're not alone. And the funny thing is, I can tell you what not to do. And because everybody does this, and it makes me a crazy person. I was talking to another coach about this week, actually. And everybody, when they hit a plateau, or sometimes they aren't seeing the progress that they want, enough progress, they immediately go down a million rabbit holes on the internet. They're like, oh, it must be fat adapted training. I'm going to switch to that. Oh, I just read that the breathing matters. And so they switch to their breathing. And then, oh, I think mileage matters. And so they go down a million rabbit holes. And then actually you start doing things to yourself that are detrimental to your training. So don't do that. The best way to handle it when you're not making progress is to kind of look at your overall training, kind of see where your holes are. See, can I improve nutrition? Can I improve sleep? Can I improve, running economy? If you are pretty good at all of those other things, then can I increase my mileage? Because increasing easy miles will help you. The problem with that is you want to make sure that you're also adding more food when you do that, or that will also become detrimental to your training. So you can look at it that way. If you can't put more miles, because if you can't put more miles on your body because you feel like that will make you too tired, or various other reasons, you can try to add some cross training in. You can try to bike or swim or do something that's a little less difficult on your body. You can try strength training. Strength training will help with your running economy. It will help, keep your muscles stronger for longer. And so you're not losing as much muscle when you're running. But just remember, when you hit a plateau, it's normal, and don't try all these things all at once. Try one thing first, go with it for like a while, just go with it for a while. The other thing you can do is, like we talked about on the podcast, change of scenery. Because a lot of times you're doing all the right things and you just have to be patient, and nobody likes to hear that, but sometimes you just need to be patient. So it takes a little while for aerobic capacity to catch up. So you might try the trails, try trail running, try to run with a different group of people, try to change your location, do things to keep your mind having fun doing it. And as soon as you do that, the plateau or not making progress won't feel as daunting, because you're focused on what you're doing day to day as opposed to the overall goal.
Yeah. And you've had plenty, I'm assuming almost every client of yours go through this at some point.
Yeah. And I will say the rabbit hole thing is really scary for me, because a lot of times people do it and don't even tell me. Because they'll just go down this rabbit hole.
They don't want to get in trouble.
Yeah. And so they're like, I'm going to do fat adapted. I'm going to change up my food, or I'm going to, it's usually fat adapted. That's usually the thing, which I'm like, don't do anything fat adapted, because then we're not plateauing. We're going backwards, and we don't want to go backwards. And if you're staying the same, you're still improving. I hate to say that people think that they're not improving when they're staying the same, but if you're staying the same, you're still improving. If you're out there every day, you're still improving. It's just when it's going to catch up. Sometimes it can take years to catch up. Sometimes it can take 3 to 5 years. So you better, it's partly why we made this podcast, so that people realize like you got to keep it fun. So you stick to it.
Yeah. And another thing is, what do you consider progress too? Is it just the race time?
Yeah.
Because the race could be anything. The
Yeah.
weather could be bad, or, there could be a lot of reasons why the race time wasn't exactly what you wanted, but you are getting better at fitness and you're getting better
Yeah.
at your daily runs. You're being more consistent. So look at the
For
things
sure.
that you are improving in, and not necessarily whatever that one threshold that you think is progress versus all the other stuff.
Yeah. The other thing is, and people don't want to hear this, but are you training too hard?
Yeah.
Like, are you training too hard? Because remember, we talked about in the last question, lactate threshold has no limits. So you can train lactate threshold and keep training it, which is like the pace that you can hold for an hour, which is a little slower than 10K pace for most people, a little faster than half marathon pace for like elite athletes, or half marathon pace. But it is a pace that doesn't really feel that hard when you're doing shorter intervals on the track, but you can improve tremendously by holding back on the track and doing those intervals, or slowing down your easy run. You could try slowing down your easy run for a little bit and see if that helps. Typically, I can tell you in a plateau, it's not work harder. I can tell you that.
Yep. All right. So we'll go to the next question coming in from Strava is, and this one, and we're all feeling it right now. After running through these dog days of summer, will our strength and stamina be leveled up when it finally gets cooler? Thanks to Peter. We've actually had Peter on the podcast before. So we talk about the heat a lot around these parts,
Yeah.
Coach Maria.
Yeah. And you do get a bump in fitness. The bummer part about it is it only lasts for about 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Now, I do think, and this is purely anecdotal, just from watching my runners, I think that we in Florida run at a higher dew point even all year round, so that we do have a little bit more blood plasma than most people. But when you're coming off the summer, we have a significant more amount of blood plasma, which means we can hold more red blood cells, and we can, as long as your iron is high, as long as you're checking your iron,
doing all the things, eating all the things, and drink.
Yeah. And as long as you're carbo loaded correctly, you can run 2 to 4% faster in a colder day. So like I literally told one of my guys last week on our one-on-one call, I said, I want you to pick a 5K the first cold front we get, because I know we can really hit that PR right now if you have a significant cold front, and we can kind of come off that blood plasma bump. Now, and it does take 2 full weeks of being in the cold temperature to have that blood plasma come down. And usually in October, we're still not getting 2 weeks of full cold weather. So we can carry our blood plasma all the way into like November. So it doesn't start dwindling until like November and December.
And that's one of the reasons why we travel for a lot of fall races, because our blood plasma all the way, I mean, again, there's still 90-degree days in November. So we haven't really, even though we might have gotten some breaks, not significant amount of cool weather. So you can travel to go anywhere else in the country in November and in December. And I mean, really feel like you have your motorboat going on.
That's partly why I like Chicago, because Chicago Marathon is it's notoriously 50-50 hot and cold now. It used to be almost always cold. Now it can be hot, but it's funny, if you're coming from Florida, you still have that bump. I mean, you can never, even if it's 70 dew point in Chicago, which I've seen it be that high before, it's still not 75 to 78, which we've been running in regularly. So we can still run better than the people in Chicago. I mean, we're never going to run a PR in a 70 dew point, but we're going to run better than they do in Chicago. And that's a huge bump for us this time of year. I mean, it's our advantage to being in Florida for sure.
And then, and so for the Florida runners who maybe not planning on traveling out. So, but even, once you get into December and there are cooler days, you are still feeling, you will still get some benefit, right? From, I think if you run, especially in Tampa, Tampa is just humid
all year round.
Yeah.
You're still, if you're going someplace where the dew point is below 50, you're always going to have a little bit of an edge.
Yeah.
Always. And just because we're smarter running in it, even if, like, remember grandma's, oh, you weren't around then, I don't think.
I wasn't there, but
Yeah.
the fact that it still gets talked about is how hot it was.
It was so hot, and it was
Grandma, by the
black.
way, that's up in Duluth, Minnesota, and you
Yeah,
go in
it's a
June, and it's
great
usually
race.
really chilly, and people
Yeah.
PR every year, except the year that a bunch of people from Tampa went. And it was
Yeah,
so
we
hot.
had 50 people there, and it was funny because the day before it said, and actually we had been running through the winter, so we didn't have as much blood plasma as we normally do, but we still had some. And so when we went up there the day before, I was like, oh man, I'm going to have to change everybody's pace plans because the dew point is now saying way higher than it was going to be. So I changed everybody's plans the night before, and everybody finished.
Yeah.
And it was black flag conditions. And so even though a lot of them had really rough races because they didn't listen to me, I won't mention any names, but some people still decided they were going to go out at their regular pace plan, and they like blew up and exploded and had like the worst race of their life. But they still finished because we're used to running in this weather, and it is an advantage. Like when you're out there slogging through these summer months, just know you're stronger, and most people up north would not be able to hack it the way we do. They wouldn't.
And you even know that because in years past, you spent several weeks up in Maine, and then you come
Yep.
back here in August and go.
Yeah, and I coached.
Yeah.
I've coached in Boston. I've coached in Memphis. Memphis is a hot summer, but it's shorter.
Mhm.
And also in the mornings, it's a little cooler. So even though it was hard, it's not the same as 6 months humid, relentless. Like
Yeah.
it's relentless here. It's there's no break. There's no break for 6 months.
And we can, again, it should give you, as hard as it is, and there are many, many hard mornings and afternoons when I'm
Yes.
out there thinking, what am I even doing? But you should give you a little bit of swagger, because
It should. I
nobody
think a
else
lot
is
of
doing
people.
this.
I think a lot of people let it get in their head, and I get confused about that because I'm like, you wouldn't be able to run a fast marathon in 78 dew point.
Right.
Why do you expect to be able to hit marathon pace down here in the summer? That doesn't even make any logical sense. Like if you think about it. But if you turn it around and you reframe it and you're like, dang, like I'm really killing it. I'm out here. I'm still getting aerobic capacity, and I'm, as long as you make sure you're eating enough and drinking enough and not letting it put you in a hole, this is a definite advantage.
Just think about it. If every time you ran, you only ran uphill, how proud you would be. Like,
Exactly.
this is hard, but look what I did.
Exactly.
Same thing. All right.
Yeah,
So
it's same thing. I like that.
we heard from Harvey, who is a lifelong runner. This made me very excited. He wants to be able to give advice for some new runners because his daughter, who's 14, just started cross country. And so he said, I'm just a dad who loves to run and wants to try to help his daughter. So, what would you say as dad, as a sort of a sideline coach, what should he be looking out for her?
Well, a couple things. If she has a coach, I suggest zip your mouth.
Coming from a coach.
Yes. But I do think that the most important thing for a 14-year-old when they're running is to keep it fun. Shout out to Kira McGraw. Like I watch her. She coaches down in Key West, and she makes sure those girls they work hard, but they are having a ball while they're doing it. And that makes them want to show up to practice. They like running. They have a great team. She does fun events with them. The most important part of cross country, in my opinion, is keeping it fun, because I have seen so many cross country kids quit and never want to run again because, especially in Florida, their coaches ran them into the ground and they hated running. And these girls that Kira's coaching are improving. They're doing really well, and she's making it fun for them. So I would say really, really try to make sure she's having fun. And if she's not having fun, figure out a way for her to have fun.
And it's clear that Harvey must find it fun. He said he's been doing it his
Yeah.
life. So she hopefully has seen him be a role model of that, and like that he's out there for his entire life. So hopefully there's already a little bit of familial bond going on
Yeah.
too.
I didn't let my kids do cross country because of it. And selfishly, I just wanted them to be lifelong runners. And I was afraid that the coaches in the area would push them too hard and they would hate it. And I just didn't want them to hate running. So we didn't do that. And I don't agree with telling the coach what they should and shouldn't do. So it would have been tough for me to have a kid that was running cross country and getting run into the ground and keeping my mouth shut at the same time. So we didn't do that. But
you don't not keeping your mouth shut? I'm shocked.
yeah, I struggle with that. I am getting better in my old age. But
Yeah, I agree. But I hope that Harvey and his daughter get to go on nice runs together now that she's getting into it.
That would be something you could really do, is get her to run easy with you. Go run some easy miles with her and help her learn to talk through the running and all that stuff. I mean, I ran with a girl that ran in college a couple weeks ago, and she was like, I hate running and I never want to run again because all of our easy runs were a race. And she's like, I felt like it took all the fun out of it. And I'm like, yeah, of course it did. And now she's running for fun. And thankfully she didn't quit running because of that. But learning how to run the easy run makes all the difference in the world. And so if we can teach our kids that would be winning.
And that's our next question.
I was surprised that we didn't have one of these earlier, but
so Michelle wanted to know, when you say easy run, are you basing it on heart rate? Are you basing it on pace? What would constitute in your mind as a coach when I say, hey, go out and run easy? Or Harvey, when you and your daughter go out and run easy together, what exactly does that mean?
So I don't really like to do heart rate for easy runs. And I don't really like to do pace for easy runs. I like to do effort for easy runs. So, and this is where people struggle. I think she said, did she say in that question that should your easy run? I thought maybe it was part of the other question. She said that, should your easy run get faster as you get fitter, I think.
Oh, interesting. I didn't see that part. Yeah.
Yeah. It is true that your easy run does typically get faster the more fit you get. But the funny part to that is a lot of times when you're getting fitter, you have to hit harder paces. So sometimes, depending on the person, the easy run actually has to slow down, even if you're fitter, so that you can hit the paces that you need to hit on your hard days.
On the other runs, yes.
On the other runs. And so that's why I say effort, because, when we try to hit a certain pace, that's not going to give us the right effort. The effort should feel meditative. It should feel like you could do it all day long. It shouldn't hurt. I mean, the recovery runs sometimes the day after a track workout are going to hurt anyway. Even if you slow down as much as you can slow down, they still feel like your legs are heavy, and you still have that third rule where you're going to have some really crappy runs. But for the most part, you shouldn't be feeling like you're out of breath or can't run any further. And a lot of times, like I see this a lot, people are like, I couldn't finish my long run. And I get really confused about that, because I'm like, how do you not finish your long run? Is it because, you just have to slow down. And that's really, I think a lot of times, and it's the thing I do sometimes worry about with interval training, because interval training doesn't teach you to slow down. It teaches you to stay at your same pace and then walk a little bit, stay at your same pace and then walk a little bit. And so you're not training yourself to keep your easy runs easy. You're just kind of going up and down. So even though you do have to do it sometimes, I still use walk run intervals sometimes for myself, but I still keep that run really, really easy when I'm running. But yeah, it's an effort. It should feel easy. Like we talked about, the singing. That's a really good way to do it. You should be able to sing. Yeah, you should be able to sing. You should be able to have a lengthy conversation where you just don't need to take a break. You can just keep talking and keep talking and keep talking. And if you can't do that, then it's not easy run pace.
And and you don't like heart rate as much for multiple reasons. You can have elevated heart rate for other things, but also it's just hot here.
Yeah. I
And
mean, if I did heart rate training here,
we'd all
I
walk.
would, I
Yeah.
would be, everybody would be walking,
Yeah.
which is not horrible. It's sometimes you have to walk, run to keep your heart rate low, but also depending on how you're recovering, if you're, if you're in any kind of deficit, which most people are running in a deficit, which it shouldn't be, but a lot of people are, then your heart rate's going to be higher. If you drink a lot of caffeine, your heart rate's going to be higher. If you didn't eat before you run, your heart rate's going to be higher. If you're more tired and didn't sleep, your heart rate's going to be higher. So if we did that,
Yeah.
in order to do heart rate training, you'd have to have every other variable right on. And plus, you'd have to have no humidity.
And that's
Like
not
that's
going to
just,
happen.
no, not in Florida. So
Yeah.
I do think we can take the effort and we can still improve. Um, and to not get so focused on easy run pace. Like I know a lot of people that are just like, well, Strava, I don't want to be under 10 I don't want to be over 10-minute pace because that makes me look slow on Strava. I'm like, nobody cares. Nobody cares what your easy run
Don't you
pace
want to
is.
be demure and mindful?
Demure, right.
Maria did a TikTok about how demure she is and how she allows Strava to show her very slow, easy run. So demure.
It is true. I laugh, and it's sometimes the faster runners too, because I think it's funny. The faster people get, the more they think, oh, my easy run has to be faster. And the reality is like the faster you get and the older you get, the more your easy run has to slow down. So if you're trying to hit certain paces and you can't hit them, or you're not improving or you're getting worse, then slow your easy run down, make it go by effort again, and not try to hit a pace. Because sometimes like a lot of people use the Macmillan calculators and they're great, but they'll go especially on their easy run pace based on their PR in cold weather.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to use a Macmillan calculator, which I love Macmillan's calculator, I use it a lot for coaching. But if you're going to do that, do a 5K in the summer, in the middle of the month, in the middle of the summer, and then use that number to get your easy run pace. And then you'll be able to get an easy run pace. But I still think even that is not accurate for everybody. The effort really works for everybody because everybody knows their effort.
All right. Speaking of in the summer, how do you know how many electrolytes we need? Because I just grabbed, I mean, should I ever do 2 elements, like 2 packets of element, or is that going to be too much? Or I do wonder about that sometimes.
Yeah. So if you, for a healthy person, if you get too much salt, you pee it out.
Okay.
So I don't worry so much about salts, magnesium and potassium, because we're losing so much of it. I would say if you're cramping a lot, you're not getting enough electrolytes. And I would say electrolytes, because a lot of people just are so anti-electrolytes. I don't know why. People are just stubborn and want to like do a ton of water, and a ton of water just doesn't hydrate you. If you notice when you drink a ton of water, you pee it out. So the reality is like, if you're drinking water with salt in it, then you're keeping it in you more. So like pay attention to that. If you're peeing clear, you're drinking too much water. So electrolytes are really important for summer running. If you're questioning it, I would say get a patch. They have all of these patches now where you can put the patch on for an hour. And you'd have to pay attention to the conditions, because I'd make sure it's a really, really bad day, like a 76 to 78 dew point, which is pretty common here, and do it for an hour. And then you get a pretty, clear. One of my runners just had it done and he was like, I had no idea how much salt I was losing. So I can't even believe it.
Because it analyzes your sweat, like what's in your sweat. Like what did you lose in an hour? Yes.
Would be shocked, especially males. And especially people that sweat a lot. Like I sweat a ton. So I don't drink any water. I drink all electrolyte water. And then when I'm running, I do electrolytes with sugar, because the sugar helps you stay hydrated. So, and you need it for calories when you're running. So I would, if you're cramping, you're not getting enough electrolytes. That means salt, magnesium, potassium. What I see a lot in runners is, because runners like to, Megan Featherstone would be so mad that I'm going to use this term, but they like to eat clean. She always says, what do you wash your food?
No such thing. Yeah.
They like to eat clean, but we all know that clean means that you eat mostly whole foods. And which is great. I think you should eat whole foods. You have to eat a tremendous amount of whole foods if you are marathon training. And not only that, whole foods don't have salt in them. So if you're not eating any processed food, you're not getting enough salt. I can tell you right now. So you're going to have to add salt to your food. You're going to have to take salt supplements. You're going to have to do that. They have them in pills. If you want to take salt pills, salt tablets, you kind of have to try a few things. And then the other thing is in 78 dew point, when you're doing a 20 miler, sometimes there's not ever going to be enough salt.
Right.
Like you're just never going to get that right.
Because I'll notice it, the front of right behind my forehead, if I didn't have enough electrolytes during the day, it'll feel, I mean, I guess that's dehydration, I guess. Like it feels like there's just like this dull ache right behind my forehead. And then I'm like, okay, yes, I'm getting another.
You know what's really weird for me? My shoulders, and I noticed it the other day because I'm back in a deficit because, I'm working with that coach, but I could tell immediately, which is why I'm not going over 4 miles. Cause I'm just like, I can't in a deficit do it in the summer. My shoulders, right inside my shoulders, like almost feels like I can't rotate my arms anymore. And it's always happened to me when my electrolytes are low.
Oh,
And I don't know.
You think it's like an inflammation thing?
I think it's lack of carbs, I'm still eating carbs, but just not enough for the heat. Which is why I'm limiting my activity. But I just notice that if you're not eating enough sugar, if you're not getting enough electrolytes, your joints don't move the same way. They don't, there's no lubricant. So you have to be really careful about it, but you also have to know, I have a lot of runners that just think there are answers for everything. And I hate to tell you, but there just sometimes isn't. Sometimes it's just a really crappy run. And sometimes even in 78 or a couple weeks ago, we had 81 dew point.
It was bad.
I don't care how many electrolytes you take in. If you're a male and you're running 20 miles in 81 dew point, first of all, not very many people will do that. You can't take in enough to get to not cramp at that point. You just can't. So you kind of have to work with what you get and know, oh, it's 81 dew point and I'm just going to do the best I can and we'll work on it another time. Yeah. Like when the dew point gets lower.
All right. So we're moving on. Let's see the next question. So we got a couple of them that came in to the Strava group in the last day. Donald had one. He says he's just had a partial knee replacement. Now he was like, he wants to know about how about running afterwards. Can I build up to 2 to 3 miles a few times a week if I've had this partial knee replacement? And I know you've also dealt with this with some of your clients as well, Coach.
Yes, I have a woman right now that had a knee replacement. First of all, I'm going to say this. I always say this. I'm not a doctor. So you do need to consult to your doctor always on what they say about knee replacement. So I have some people that quit running after they had their knees done. Because I do know that your knee replacements only last a certain amount of miles. So if you are somebody that is trying to save those knees and don't want to have it done again, then you do have to be careful of that.
I didn't realize that. That really, I mean,
yeah,
it's very interesting.
They can wear out again, especially if you're running. So, but I would say that obviously the technology is better. It's getting better and better as we go with these replacements. I do believe you can work up to most things. One thing with knee replacements that I would be really careful with is running downhill. I would just, which is nice in Florida, you don't have to worry about it as much. That's 3 times the force, 3 to 5 times the force of on your knees going downhill. So you really want to be careful about how you build, making sure you're doing it carefully. And if you're just recreationally running, like it shouldn't be a problem. Like if you're doing 2 to 3 miles, 3 to 4 times a week, that's great. But obviously things can go wrong. So
Doctor
is what I would say on that. And every doctor is going to have a different opinion on it. I'm going to tell you right now, my client that had it done, her doctor said she could run. So we're running. But she even has to back off sometimes. Like you have to be really careful about how you're doing it. And when things start to hurt, that's your warning sign. Nope, we're not doing that anymore, right? So pain is there for a reason. Listen.
All right. So Jamie says, I'm 63 next month. Happy birthday, Jamie. What advice for older runners do you have to manage those expectations as we age? I thought that was an interesting take on it, as opposed to how do I continue to run, blah, blah, blah. It's like, how do I mentally prepare for what I know is coming, which is going to be, I'm not going to be able to run as much or as fast as I used to.
Yeah, let me say that I don't care what age you are, managing your expectations is the number one thing that you can do to be successful as a runner. Running is hard. There are going to be days that suck, and there are going to be days that are wonderful, and there are going to be days that are meh, and you have to anticipate them. As it's funny, as an older runner, I would say there's a couple of different things. Like if you've been running your whole life, the expectation has to be, oh, well, I'm going to slow down. And I have a lot of runners that will do like age group different. Every time they do an age group, it'll be age group PR, or this is the best run they come up with different goals like this. I did a negative split, or I ran a consistent race, or you want to come up with different goals that aren't so time focused, because if you've been running your whole life, you will slow down. Mm-hmm. Now I do have a couple runners in their 60s that are killing it right now, but that they started later in life. So if you're starting later in life, you still have those, you don't know what you could have done back then. So, and sometimes I have to manage those expectations, because I'm like, hey guys, you're doing so well. And like I had this runner he was killing it in his 50s, and we qualified him for Boston, and he was doing so well. And I'm like thinking to myself, dang, I wish I had this guy in his 20s, because he would have been running like a 3-hour marathon, like if he knew what he was doing, but he didn't know. But the benefit to it is now he's able to run at a higher level, at an older age, because he didn't trash himself when he was younger. So, my good friend Bart Yasso, he always says, and I love this, he always says, you have a certain amount of miles, Maria. You just have a certain amount of miles, and I've run my miles. And he still is out there trying his hardest with his Lyme disease, but he is slowing down. And he said, I'm not ready to quit yet, but he's run a lot of miles in his, he's in his 60s, and he's run a lot of miles, and he knows that he's limited in his miles now. So even if it's just getting up and getting out of bed because I want to be able to keep moving, and running makes me feel alive, that's a great expectation. Yeah. Running makes me feel good. As long as running is making you feel good, keep doing it. If it's not, then find something else that is. Like, I am not going to be the coach that's going to be like, keep running. You have to keep running. If it is your hobby, then keep it your hobby. It has to be fun. If you're not having fun anymore with it, switch hobbies.
Yeah.
Do something different.
Because then you're starting, you're saying that people start late and they can improve for 15 years. Yeah. So now if you start a new hobby, you can improve in that.
Yeah, totally.
But don't give it up just because of your age. Like, if you are out there and loving it, continue to love it.
And there's I want you to remember when you're later in life, because I think a lot of older people forget this. And it's also because our society is really not great with older people. I really don't feel like they are. They're kind of unseen, and I don't love that. But there are a lot of people like me and you, I think, that really look at these older people and just are like, oh, I mean, every time I see somebody in their 60s and 70s running, I am like, oh, I hope that's me. Yes. I just want to be that person so badly. I want to keep running. So just remember, there are a lot of people like us that really, really want to be still running in our 60s, and hope that we are lucky enough to do it. So you are tremendously looked up to in our land. So
yes, I agree with that.
Yeah.
Nathaniel had a different question. He was one of our first earlier in the show, but how long, and Maria, you've talked about this, how long could you not run before you start to lose that fitness? Because you often say, like, take a break if you need to take a break, but about how long should that break last?
That's a great question. I love that question. It's really 2 weeks. You start to lose 10% after 2 weeks. And people are funny because they think, oh, if they get an injury, they have to take 6 weeks off. It's the end of the world. Now, the older you get, it is a little harder to come back. It does take a little longer to come back, but 6 weeks off, it should take you about 6 weeks to get back to where you were. So 8 weeks off, it should take you 8 weeks. 12 weeks off, it should take you 12 weeks. So, and really, if you are like, if you're going on a vacation, I have a lot of people, one of my girls is going on vacation on Wednesday, and she was like, oh, I'm going to be gone a week and I'm in the middle of marathon training. I'm like, okay, recovery week. Just run 2 or 3 times. If you run 2 or 3 times for 20 to 30 minutes, you don't lose any fitness. So like, I don't care what your Garmin says, because your Garmin will be like, oh, recovery, deconditioning. That's not true. Your Garmin doesn't know everything, guys. I hate to tell you, but your Garmin doesn't know how many years you've been running. I mean, some of you does, but not my Garmin doesn't know how many years I've been running, because there was no Garmin for 10 years before. So you got to trust in your fitness. And like Leigh and I say a lot, as long as you're being consistent overall, it's okay to take a break. It's okay. You're not going to lose that much.
All right. So Kendra had 2 questions. Number 1, how should I start training for a marathon? Kind of a broad question, but I also think that people like that, you know, for me, before I did my first one, I was like, could I ever run a marathon? And then, and then it was.
Look at you now, Leigh.
Hey, I got 7 under my belt. If you count the one on Bayshore that we did in 2020.
Yeah, that was a crazy one.
Try not to count that one. But the you know, just how do you how far along in your fitness do you need to be before you're like, okay, I think I can tackle this sort of massive undertaking?
I think if you have run a half marathon, you should consider a marathon. A lot of people just go from 5K to marathon, and you can do it. I'm not going to say you can't. In fact, I'm never going to tell you you can't, because I'm not like that person. But I think that always when you're running a first marathon, your goal should be only to love the marathon. And if that's your goal, then you really don't need to do a lot of speed work. You don't need to do a crap ton of miles. You don't need to do anything fancy. You just need to easy run your way through it. And then if you can figure out your fueling and running a negative split in the marathon, which is hard, but if you can figure out how to do that, then you will enjoy the experience. And then after that, you can start to play with the marathon a little bit. But for your first marathon, anybody can do it. If you have 20 miles a week under your belt for a solid 6 months, that's going to make marathon training easier. Yeah. It just is. If you're going from
have that base.
Yeah. If you're going from 5 miles a week to marathon, it's going to hurt a lot.
It's going to hurt.
It's just going to be, you're going to be sore every week. The first time you run a marathon, the first time you're hitting some of these distances, like a 10 mile, a 12 mile, a 14 mile, you're just going to be in a lot of pain. Like it's a lot of pain the first time. Once you do it, I mean, 2 or 3 times, like it's not nearly as a big deal as the first time, but I would say the slower you go, the less apt to be in pain you are. So I always say slower is better. But it's manageable as long as you just run easy. Just run easy.
And that was, I talked at the very beginning of the show, the falling into the pitfalls. I mean, I didn't know anybody who was really running a marathon, and I decided to do it. And so it's like, okay, well, I can run this mile, and I can run a mile at 9 minutes pace. So then I just so I would run an 18 at a 9-minute pace. Then I would ran my 20 at a 9-minute pace. What do you think? I ran exactly 21 miles in the race at a 9-minute pace, and then walked because that was as far. I trained myself to go exactly that far. That was it. But I wish that someone had said, hey, you can slow those down and it won't hurt as bad.
And what I love about you bringing up that example in particular is because you trained yourself to hit a wall.
Yeah.
Because when you're running at marathon pace every time, you're not training the right system to run 26 miles fast. You're training your body to only burn carbohydrates. And so when it's only burning carbohydrates, it doesn't know what to do when you run out of them, because you will when you're running a marathon, whether you like it or not. I don't care how many gels you take, you're running out of carbohydrates. I had 1 packet of sport beans
in that entire time. So yeah,
Ouch.
all the pitfalls.
I'm so happy that you still like marathons, Leigh, because
took me a
after
long
that,
time.
yeah, I would think most people would be in that situation. You're just not loving it. So, but I think the goal of your first marathon should always be to have fun and try to stay away from that medium pace, because you really are. And when you're running that medium pace for your long runs, you're really training yourself to hit that wall. That's you can expect it.
Yep. Is there a benefit to running on the road versus on a treadmill? And again, we had a whole episode on this, but Kendra, in a sort of a quick answer to this.
Well, it depends on the person. I know I say that a lot, but it does. There is zero benefit to running on a treadmill if you're Maria, because I hate it. I have tried it in Florida. I hate it. And I don't believe in doing things as an athlete that you absolutely hate. Can you train on a treadmill? Absolutely. Some people love it. Some people love to watch things on TV. Some people love to have their fuel right there. Some people love to be able to go to the bathroom and, on their long runs. Totally. Go for it. If you're Maria, no way. But it definitely has benefits, especially in the summer. Like if you can't hit your marathon pace and you're really trying to hit a marathon pace, for your upcoming marathon, then treadmill is a great way to do it. In the heat, it's difficult to hit marathon pace for those long miles. Or tempo pace. Tempo pace is very difficult in this weather. So if you can do a solid treadmill workout, the only thing I say about the treadmill is it's really interesting, because what happens if you're running on a treadmill at tempo pace and you stop?
Well, you fall down.
Yeah. What happens if you're running tempo pace in a race and you stop? Nothing. So my point is, you have to be able to train yourself to keep going when you don't want to keep going, because the treadmill kind of trains you to get into that pace and that rhythm and just stay there. And it pushes you to keep going.
Yeah.
You have to still be able to push yourself. So I would say, make sure that if you're going to add treadmill, don't do all treadmill. Do some treadmill, some road. So you know what to do on race day.
All right. So then
I got in really big trouble one time.
You did.
When I said I will train on a treadmill when horses for the Kentucky Derby train on treadmills. Oopsies.
That's just you. But that was you. It's you for Maria, that's how you feel.
But the social media warriors were not happy with me. That's okay. I have learned to be like, there are some people that like it. And for you guys, I'm impressed, because it does take a lot of mental fortitude to be on the treadmill.
I did a lot when I first started as well. And I had to have something on TV. I had to have something different in my ears. I watched HGTV, because you can watch the house change, the renovation. So you can watch that without having to look. So I had to have two different ways to distract me. So Tony wants to know, how do you balance strength training and marathon training? This is a question I have, because I'm just trying to learn how to strength train. And when you add marathon training on that, I'm so tired.
I know. So interesting. This is a very good question, because strength training has gotten a lot of focus lately, because the research is showing how important it is not to lose muscle. And as runners, we do tend to lose muscle when we're only running. So if anything, we should be strength training to help keep the muscle that we have. It's really important for longevity and in our health in our later years to keep as much muscle as we can. That being said, we're so all or nothing, right? We're like, if I can't lift weights 4 times a week, it's not doing anything, and I'm not doing heavy. And if you go on the interwebs, which I like to call it, they'll be like, lift heavy, over 40, lift as heavy as you can, which is true. However, you can't do that when you're marathon training, guys. Like you literally cannot lift super, super heavy and do the miles you need to do to complete marathon training. So you should set it up like anything else. Recovery is most important, always. So your rest days are sacred. So if you have a track workout, you do strength on the track workout day. Best time to do it is right after you do a track workout. If you can't do it right after the workout, second best time to do it is the night of the track workout. So you do track workout in the morning, strength training at night. Third best option, if you can't do it, is to do it the next morning in the same 24 hours. You're doing the strength training. And then you have a couple days recovery before you do another workout or you have strength training again. You really, when you're marathon training, only need 20 to 30 minutes 2 times a week to keep your muscle. That's it. You don't need to do any more than that. And then I would also say when you're not marathon training, that's when you should increase your weightlifting. So have it in your off season, which we all should have an off season. Make sure that you are doing, 3 to 4 times a week. Like me right now, I'm in an off season. So I'm doing 4 days a week of heavy lifting, and I'm only running 4 days a week, 30 to 40 minutes. That's fine. You can handle that. But you don't want to be doing all things at once, which we love to do. I got to do all the things so I can be the best, but it's just not true.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's about that balance. And I know everybody hates that word, but you got to balance it.
But I think you can even feel it. Like this is too much to handle right now. I mean, so when you're not in that full marathon training, then you can add some of those. I think that makes total sense.
And actually, it's really going to help you. Like strength training really helps you. It helps you keep your form longer. It makes you stronger. You're able to push harder for longer. It helps with glycogen stores. It helps you utilize your glycogen stores more effectively. It also it keeps you more balanced, and so you're less injury prone as long as you're doing your strength training correctly. The interesting part is strength training is it's especially for women, it's so much more important than we ever thought it was. And now there's a lot of research that says jumping and doing like jump ropes and box jumps and stuff like that for women that are older is more important than running. Actually, I hate to say that out loud, but it is like very important for our mitochondria to grow and stay strong is to do some jumping. So not during marathon training, because I do think jumping during marathon training is really a stress fracture waiting to happen. But in your off season, do some jumping, do jump rope. Like you don't have to do anything complicated. Yeah. Jump rope a little bit.
You're saying
don't make it harder than yeah. Well, sometimes
it's seen me try to jump rope before, but
yeah. But it doesn't have to be like big box jumps. It can just be a little jump, a little box jump. You don't have to do the big high ones, but it is important to jump and it's important to lift heavy. So in the off season, really work on training those muscles, and then you're going to be able to run for longer, actually.
All right, Cheryl, we're kind of run out of time, and we're going to go through these kind of quickly. Cheryl wanted to know, how do you keep that high level of endurance without wearing yourself down? Because that's the reason why people need a coach, because it's real easy to just drive yourself into the ground trying to do all the things, weight lift and eat right,
Yeah. And I would say the best way to keep a high level of running all the time is, and this is probably not what Cheryl wants to hear, but is to make sure you have a down season. Like you do have to have a significant down season if you're going to do it. Even the elite athletes take a down season where they're not running 115 to 20 miles a week. But even Steve Magnus posted the other day, he's like, some people, and this is where I think some recreational runners get into trouble, because they think just because you can run many, many miles that you should. Steve Magnus was talking about how he has runners that run at the elite level at 50 to 60 miles a week, and he has runners that run 120, and it depends on the person. So some people just can't run the high mileages. But if you are trying to do that, the number one thing is sleep and eating. You got to eat for it. You got to be able to eat for it.
All right. I like that. Sleeping and eating. Speaking of, Carla, who just ran that Paris Marathon. We talked about it last week, I think, last time that she got to run the People's Marathon. So she wants to know about post-marathon nutrition. We talk a lot about, while you're training and what to do during the race nutrition. But what does post-marathon nutrition look like? Do you have to continue to eat the amount of food that you were doing, and for how long?
Yeah, for about a week, you do need to keep your calories high. People tend to, right after a marathon, cut their calories because they're like, I'm not exercising as much, but you really need those extra calories for recovery. So I would say for at least a week, make sure your calories are high. And I always say, really listen to what your body's craving. If your body's craving a lot of carbohydrates, it's because it burned through too many and it needs carbohydrates. If it's craving salt, it needs electrolytes. If it's clean, like there's so many things that your body will just tell you what it needs. A lot of times it'll say protein. You'll just start craving chicken wings. Like
I've craved steak before, and I was like, it's either protein or iron.
Iron or protein. Like your body will tell you what you need if you listen. So just eat what feels right the week after and don't cut your calories. That's the worst thing you can do. And then after that 1 week period, I usually tell my runners to take the week off and just walk. That helps. And then you can slowly, if you're going to, you slowly like reverse taper. So you go back up in miles, you can bring your calories down slowly. You don't want to ever dramatically cut your calories, but slowly to adjust to the mileage. But she has a little extra issue because she has the long COVID. So she needs a little bit extra recovery. That's really important.
But just in life, don't just immediately after that big race, if you've been ingesting all the calories.
It's not the time to just switch. Oh, now I'm dieting. That's a bad idea.
All right.
You still have to take those 4 weeks, typically 4 weeks of recovery before you jump into another cycle.
All right. So this is our last question. And I'm going to say this one is anonymous because a friend of mine was asking for her daughter, just asking me. And I said, I gave her my answer, but I wanted Maria to also answer it. So she is worried about her stinky running clothes. So she's just going to college. So she's going to be living in a small dorm room with people that she may or may not know all the time. And she just gotten into running. She got into cross country in her junior and senior year in high school. And she's like, nobody else's clothes stink like mine, which first of all, not true. But then you are in this sort of tight confinement in college. But just in general, what can we do about sweaty, stinky running clothes?
So that's a good question. And if I actually knew the answer to that, my clothes wouldn't stink. But this morning at the gym, on my run to the gym, I was lifting and thinking how bad my clothes smelled. So unfortunately, your clothes are going to stink, especially if you live in Florida. My answer to this would be like, make sure you have friends that love you anyway.
Exactly. You'll know who your real friends are.
Yeah, your friends will love you, or if they can tease you about it and you can take it, then you've won. But yeah, some people talk about washing their clothes with vinegar. Sometimes that can help. I typically, there are certain fabric softeners and stuff that you can buy. I haven't found them to work really well, but maybe that's just because I'm extra stinky.
Yeah.
You can try.
And she's even thinking like before, you're also in a dorm. You don't have access to the washer and dryer right then. So, my advice to her was, because Cody had said you can't, with leggings, with the expensive leggings, to get into the shower with them on to get the salt and get the sweat off of them to make them last longer. So I was like, if she wants to get into a shower with the bra, with the sports bra and take it off there, rinse it off, take it off there, and then hang it up to dry.
Yeah. Then hang it up and then wash it.
Yeah.
When you're ready to wash it. Yeah, that's a good idea. Take a shower in your clothes. Then you'll really find some new friends because they'll be like, who's this weirdo? But that's cool. Like you'll find your friends, right?
Yes.
Your people.
But yes, I mainly, every runner has stinky running clothes. The problem is now you're going to a college where you might not have, your roommates might not be runners and might not know that every runner's clothes stink.
Yeah. And don't, whatever you do, put them in a bag and hide them in your closet. Oh. That is a bad idea.
Or even put
that is a bad idea.
In the dirty clothes bag or whatever while they're still stinky, while they're still wet, because then everything gets that musty.
Yes. That is nasty. Don't do that. Don't do that. I mean, you could even, I would imagine it would be better. You'd be better off putting it in the sink. Like if you just took them right off and put them in the sink and rinsed them out right after, if you can't wash them right away. You could do that too. But it is kind of a nasty part about living in Florida and running. Ooh,
but you're not alone. That's what I want. Yes,
you are not alone.
It is
really
stink.
true.
We all stink. It's just part of the elegance of running.
It is true.
It can be fun. It can be hard. It can be stinky. All of those things, all at the same time. All right, we've got a really long this time. The coach's drill. You got 1 minute in you.
Oh, yeah. I got 1 minute in me. I can do it real quick.
All right. Coach's drill is don't be afraid to get a coach.
Yeah. I think a lot of people think that coaches are meant for elite athletes, but they're not. So if you're struggling with some of these questions and you really need help, either hire a coach for an hour and ask them, or hire a coach to help you with your training. Nobody is going to make fun of you or laugh at you. Everybody has a coach for something. Everybody, all the tennis players have coaches. You can have a coach as a runner too. And make sure when you look for a coach, look for one that matches your personality. Go for one that, interview a couple and go for one that you feel comfortable with, that you feel like you can talk to, or you can feel like you can, troubleshoot with, because you don't want it to be like a, coach is here and you're here kind of thing. It's a team effort. So find somebody that you can be a good team with, and there's plenty of good ones out there. So go find one. I did it.
Well, and what I do always say when people have said, you have a coach to run, and I go,
Yeah.
How many people do you know who have a personal trainer at the gym? Like, I think people just assume you should be able to know how to run. And I mean, I could run like a child, but I don't know how to train for a marathon. Just like I don't know how to use a lot of that equipment in a gym. So, all of that. And then you ask that personal trainer questions about, how much weight should I lift? Well, how many miles should I run, coach? So that's kind of how I think
and
about
it keeps you healthier for longer.
Yeah.
And that's the goal, right? You just got to find the right one for you. And everybody has a little bit of different things that they're looking for. And there's tons of good coaches out there now. There's tons of good running coaches. Back when I started, I was like the only one doing it. But now there's a lot of good coaches out there. So go find one that matches with you.
Yeah. And you can join our Strava group. And if you have any questions, you can always ask there, right, Coach?
Yes.
All right. Well, thanks for answering all the questions, Coach. Thanks for all the questions coming in from everyone. We'll see you next time.
All right. Next week. Bye.